Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys here with two young lads who've got their plate full lately. Reed Darcey, our LSU women's basketball writer, and obviously Koki Riley, our LSU baseball beat writer. We are here today to get into, LSU winning 4 of 5, heading into SEC play, which begins on Friday, 6 o'clock at Mississippi State on the SEC Network Plus, streaming on the SEC Network Plus. And of course, we don't have a lot in the way of new news for LSU women's basketball as they've had the week off. But we are on the eve of Selection Sunday, so plenty to get into there. Gentlemen, just another quiet week on the LSU beat. No controversy, no interesting news, nothing going on. It's very, very steady as she goes, right? How you guys doing?
No controversy for Koki, really, but
no, just just a lot of good pitching.
I've seen plenty of that. Yes.
Yeah.
We will get into that. We will get into all of that as well. Of course, we are here every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. We are also here on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. If you can catch us live there, if you don't catch us live there, you can catch us there after the fact. Please subscribe. These guys have their hands full, obviously. We've got LSU spring football going on, of course. LSU gymnastics in the running for a national championship. LSU softball on the cusp of perhaps their best start ever, and coming off of a big victory over Texas on Tuesday. So there's plenty going on. Stay up to date with all of it at The Advocate, of course. Please subscribe to The Advocate if you haven't already. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And stay up to date, with everything via our LSU newsletter. You can get that delivered straight to your inbox, to your phone, to your desktop. Stay up to date with all the headlines. To sign up for the LSU newsletter, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. And of course, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL Financial Member FINRA SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. To learn more, go to Champion Wealth Strategies. Contact them at championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So we will get into the LSU women's basketball team. Certainly looking good, pretty strong in more ways than one as we head toward the postseason. But first, let's talk a little bit of LSU baseball. We have not done that quite lately on this podcast. They have played 5 games now in the past week, going 2-1 against Xavier, and of course a couple of midweek wins against the North Dakota State Bison. They head into SEC play. SEC play is upon us now. The first of 10 SEC weekends. They're going to go play Mississippi State starting at 6 o'clock on Friday in Starkville, 4 o'clock Saturday, 1 o'clock. Is that right, Koki?
Yes,
1 o'clock first pitch
so.
on Sunday. Okay, so they will close it out at 1 o'clock on Sunday. And first things first, we will get into the starting pitching and, for that matter, the bullpen, which has put on quite a show themselves lately. But first things first, let's talk about the lineup. There's been, as you would expect at this time of year, really throughout the season, but particularly early on in the season, tinkering with the lineup and some experimentation. And in some cases, I'm going to get to say, Koki, that it's not just experimentation, but just a sort of a move to get all of your good players in the lineup and give them a chance to play and start. As you mentioned, Brady Neal played in right field the other day. Paxton Kling moved down from the leadoff spot to number 8 in the order, and then of course Mac Bingham moved up into the leadoff spot. So some moving around, some mixing and matching, and of course LSU may have maybe the deepest it's ever been behind the plate. And you want to get all those guys a couple of shots to be able to contribute and play as well. So just go through some of these lineup changes and what maybe Jay Johnson is probably thinking as he's sort of mixing and matching and moving parts around.
Yeah, with the lineup changes, I guess first we'll touch on the Brady Neal thing since that happened on Tuesday. Brady Neal started in right field. And I think it was the first time ever they had Travinsky, Milazzo, and Neal in the lineup at the same exact time. At one point, they were on base at the same exact time too, which was kind of a fun situation. I think Milazzo had a hit, and Travinsky and Neal were already on base or something to that degree. Neal was great at the plate when they had him in there, and he kind of pushed their offense to a victory, a 6-1 win over North Dakota State on Tuesday. And I mean, if it weren't in the lineup, that game is probably tighter than it should be. So I think getting him into the lineup as often as they possibly can is going to be a good thing for this team. He's been one of the few good, really consistent and solid hitters for this team to start this year. They've had a lot of ups and downs with the offense, and he's been a steadier force for them. He churns out pretty quality at bats. He's hit the ball harder at a much more consistent rate than a lot of the other guys on this team. And they just need him in the order. And if that means, putting him in right field instead of having him sit one of those 3 days of a weekend series, then that's what you do. So, and I don't think it puts too much, extra pressure on him physically. And I think they've tried to be really careful with how they treat him physically because of the injury he had this back last season, and the fact that he re-aggravated the injury in the summer. And really ever since then, they've been pretty cautious about how they sort of deploy him and how much work he does as a second baseman and an outfielder, and how much catching he does, and how much reps he does as in the batting cages. And that was before the season started. So, and really ever since then, they've really sat him for usually one game out of every three in a weekend series, as I mentioned. So yeah, so that was definitely an interesting sort of thing that popped up, at least as a test case, which the midweek games can be used as sort of testing labs for Jay Johnson.
Certainly.
When it comes to his lineup. And then the other change they made was on Wednesday with Paxton Kling moving from the leadoff spot down to the number 8 hole. Kling had started in his last 10 starts they were all as the leadoff hitter. In 10 of his last 11 games, one game he came off the bench because he had a little knack and fouled the ball off of himself. But really, he had been pretty consistently leadoff guy until yesterday, and he had just been struggling at the plate. His on-base percentage, I'm pretty sure heading into yesterday, was .471, but despite that, he had a .250 batting average.
Right.
So he just wasn't putting the ball in play enough, wasn't hitting the ball hard enough. Not living up to his, I guess, quote unquote potential, even though I'm not saying that, LSU should give up on this guy or anything. That's not what I'm saying, but he had been struggling lately and they needed to find more answers on offense. And Mac Bingham has a ton of experience as a leadoff guy. He did it at Arizona pretty much all of last season. At least that's what he said. So he's kind of the perfect guy to slide into that spot. If anything happens with the Kling, you kind of have the perfect Kling, not replacement, but the perfect sort of, guy who can slide into his role a little bit. And Bingham, who has a ton of experience leading off and also has a ton of experience playing center field. Right. So that's what they kind of did here, having Bingham lead off, and Bingham went 2 for 4 and had a home run. So some of these experimentations have worked in small sample sizes, as we saw this in the middle of this week. So it'll be interesting to see what translates over to the weekend and what doesn't.
The other thing, and as you know, obviously a lot of time, maybe Paxton Kling moving down in the order, a lot of times that will sort of feels like it'll take the pressure off of somebody. You move them down in the order. The other thing too, when we're talking about all these players just sort of moving around like chess pieces, it's one thing if you're doing this and it's May 23rd and you're sort of doing this out of desperation because you're trying to find people who can play, who can get the job done, who you're still trying to figure out who you can count on, right? It's another thing to do this in early to mid-March, and it's also something to note that moving players around and a belief in versatility, that's something that Jay Johnson believes in, if I'm not
absolutely
misspoken.
Yeah, and I don't think he's afraid to shake up the apple cart if it means that it's more likely for them to win games.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's changing the lineup, whether that's changing the style of play in terms of how they score runs. Like they played.
Cade Beloso led off in the national championship game last year.
Right.
In game
exactly.
3. He's clearly not scared to make it.
As long as the leadoff guy gets on base, he doesn't care if he's fast or not.
Right.
And that's a pretty modern belief. And he'll deploy some of these more modern things into his lineup or into the rotation. And then he'll sometimes play small ball. I think this middle of this past week, they ran a hit and run, and then they ran a rundown play with runners in the corners just so they can get the runner from third to score. That's stuff they didn't really do last year or even the year before. And you saw that in the middle of this week. Just finding ways to score runs.
Well, and you're certainly more willing to do something like that because whereas, but it's not to say that they don't have power on this lineup, obviously, but I mean, my goodness, did they have heavy hitters last year. It was a whole lot more plausible and logical to just sit back and wait for their 3-run homer because you knew that was very much a possibility.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I will note that this team should probably hit for a little bit more power than they have so far.
Yes. But while they're not, go ahead and try something like this, right?
I mean, Jared Jones, I believe he hit the 20th home run they've hit this season on Tuesday, and that's not a ton. That's toward the bottom of the SEC in terms of the teams. If you just look at the overall SEC numbers, which I've had to look into a little bit more for a story that's coming out later this week. So like Jared Jones is pretty much put up his side of the bargain when it comes to the home run power, but at the same time, like you'd probably like to see a few more home runs from Tommy White, a guy like Hayden Travinski, even though Travinski's hit the ball pretty decently so far this season. Even Mac Bingham, it was only his second home run on Wednesday, and he hit like 10 last season. So I think that this team should be able to hit for more power as the season goes along.
We will keep an eye on that, obviously, as SEC play gets underway. Another thing to keep an eye on, especially in terms of tinkering and experimenting, Kade Anderson, freshman left-hander, has been, I don't want to say lights out, but close to it to this point. 3 games, 3 starts, 14 innings. He's 2-0 with a 0.64 ERA, 26 strikeouts, 6 bases on balls. So... but there's a distinct possibility that we will not necessarily see him in the midweek starters role moving forward. And Jay Johnson spoke a little bit about that. To go through that and just tell us what his thinking is behind that move.
Just to be clear, I'm pretty sure those numbers are before Tuesday's game. But I think even though he gave up 1 run in 3 innings or 2 and 2/3.
He didn't go long.
He didn't go long. And I'll get into why exactly. It's because they want to save him for this weekend. And Jay Johnson said that, not more or less said that. He said that
right
after Tuesday's game. I mean, I literally asked him the question: Was this a ploy to get him ready for this weekend? And he's like, "What do you think?" In like almost like a joking fashion. But he's like, "Yeah." And then he went on to say, "I mean, if he's one of our he's one of our best pitchers, why not have him available?" So I mean, that's hard to argue with that logic, right? And I think it's just good for him to, face better competition because he keeps on dominating these, mid-major, these smaller schools. And you kind of want to see what this kid looks like against SEC competition. Even if Mississippi State isn't, the greatest team on earth, it's still going to be a slight step up if he pitches this weekend. And I'm really interested to see, how all of his stuff plays against these veteran SEC lineups.
Worth noting also, first of all, it's very rare. This year's LSU team may be an exception in terms of your weekend starting rotation at the start of the season is not probably going to be the same as your weekend rotation at the end of the season. This team may be the exception because they're so loaded down with quality starting pitchers. But the other thing to recall and take into consideration, of course, is that we all know that once you get into the postseason, sort of all bets are off. Nate Ackenhausen, if I'm not mistaken, that was his first start in Omaha, going back to the World Series again. Yeah. And so not necessarily a bad thing to have had particularly some of your younger pitchers having served a bunch of different roles as you go down the road so that they're not necessarily broadsided by anything once they get into the postseason and the stakes get a little bit higher too.
Yeah, you don't want to pigeonhole them the same way you don't want to pigeonhole your hitters. Right. You don't want, just Michael Braswell hitting 9th every single game, or you don't want. It's nice to have the versatility with a guy like Josh Pearson who can play second base as he did on Wednesday, right? Or Brady Neal playing in right field. So I think versatility is just a theme with Jay Johnson, and just having the ability to play guys in different spots. He just sort of likes having that roster flexibility because it just allows him to do different things.
And you've got a deep pitching staff, which includes a bullpen that has, and again, you again talk about we're about to see LSU step up in competition, level of competition. But to this point, the bullpen has been about as good as you can hope that a college bullpen would be. The past 5 games against Xavier and the Bison, North Dakota State, And I did this by hand, so I might be off by a third of an inning or a run here and there, but it looks like 24 and a third innings in 5 games, a 1.47 ERA, 28 strikeouts, 12 walks. That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
That's pretty strong, and that's over a pretty decent sample size there too.
To tell you how good the rotation's been, that's probably a step behind the rotation because like the rotation didn't give up a single run against Xavier, which is, stuff like that's kind of unheard of, especially at LSU. But I mean, as you said with the bullpen, I thought they pitched a lot better. They pitched a lot better the last 5 games. I think in Houston, it was a little bit up and down. It wasn't perfect for sure. And when you look at their team ERA, the bullpen is clearly the thing that's kind of lowering them a little bit. They're still, I think, a top 5 team in terms of ERA in the SEC. But if you had to pick one thing, it's probably that. And then this weekend, they were excellent. Like Wednesday is a perfect example of this because they were really throwing the back half of their bullpen.
It's kind of Johnny Holstaff
style.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Like Will Helmer's through, in the Will Helmer's lights out so far this season. Cam Johnson threw. Aiden Moffett hadn't thrown weeks, and he threw. Christian Little, I'd say, is working his way up in terms of where he is in the bullpen. He was lights out as well, and they didn't give up. The bullpen didn't give up a single run. Heck, they threw a shutout on Wednesday, which again, that's their 5th game in 6 days, and they threw a shutout, which is something that this team would not have done last year, and especially the year before. So that kind of tells you how different the dynamics of this team is because they scored 7 runs, but like last year they scored like 20 in that game, but this year they only score 7, but they also throw a shutout, right? So like that's just, this team is just almost the complete opposite of last year in terms of all that sort of stuff.
Do you think the hitting is maybe due for some regression, like some natural regression to the mean, like maybe Travinsky and Tommy White? Do you think they just like it might regress and then sort of improve their averages just naturally, or
yes,
or what?
Yes. I think White hit the ball better this last couple games. And he got robbed of a couple hits, especially one ball he scorched up the middle, and I think the North Dakota State second baseman made probably one of the best plays I've seen in college baseball to make that stop. And he's hitting the ball better and hitting the ball more to the opposite field, which is a good sign. But I think when it comes to like regression to the mean in terms of like a positive regression, you're looking at Paxton Kling,
right?
You're looking at Mac Bingham. Those are the sort of the guys that you kind of heading into the year, you kind of expect them to either take a step forward or play up to, I guess, the quote unquote standard that they had set for themselves. And we just haven't quite seen that, at least yet. So I think those are sort of the guys you're sort of eyeing at, like, all right, when is the train going to really start moving? I think Tommy White's a good example of that, but I think we're slowly starting to see that already.
Yeah.
LSU versus Mississippi State 6 p.m. As you made mention of Koki, this is not a vintage Mississippi State team, but still the SEC. 6 o'clock Friday, 4 o'clock Saturday, 1 o'clock Sunday. What are some of the things you're going to be looking for this weekend?
How do they approach Dakota Jordan? He's been one of the best hitters in the SEC so far this season. I think he has 8 or 9 home runs. And really, Mississippi State's pitching has been a lot better than I think many people expected. They've thrown the ball pretty well overall. I think they lost. I haven't checked what happened on Wednesday when they played UNL, but they lost on Tuesday. But that was just the snap in 9-game winning streak. So they have been playing better baseball lately after a pretty rocky start. It's going to be a really good test for Mississippi State to see like how much progress have they actually made. Can they take a game? Can they take 2 games from this series? And for LSU, it's another slight step up in competition, and you want to see. For them, like, what does the offense look like when you're facing probably a slightly better pitching staff than you have the last 5 games? So you just hope for progress for LSU's offense, especially.
It's that time of year. For so many people around this state to get a crawfish boil going on the weekend and put LSU baseball either on the radio or stream. And so plenty of people are going to be looking toward that and looking forward to it over the next 2 months. And the journey begins sort of in earnest now this weekend with SEC play beginning. This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all the writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. So please subscribe if you have not, whether that's print or digital. Please subscribe. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe to do that. To stay up to date with everything, whether you subscribe or not, You can get all the headlines delivered to your phone, to your inbox, to your desktop with our LSU newsletter. And, of course, there's plenty going on. Spring football, baseball, softball is on a tear, obviously, gymnastics, and, of course, LSU women's basketball coming down the stretch here in the hunt as the NCAAs begin here in less than a week. So get the LSU newsletter delivered straight to your phone. That's to sign up. You go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. But we're here live on all our social channels Monday and Thursday, more importantly, specifically on our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. We're there live. You can catch us live. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us there after the fact. So please check out our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. And, of course, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So, Reed, you had quite a quiet time in Greenville. No
Not much
problems,
happened.
not much going on.
Nothing really happened.
Nothing really to report.
No.
Very steady as she goes. In all seriousness, what is a shame, and I will say this with a bit of earnestness. It's a shame in some ways that the skirmish that broke out with a couple of minutes to go between LSU and South Carolina in the championship game overshadowed what I thought was an illuminating trip for LSU through the SEC tournament. They are dealing with injuries, to one degree of severity or the other. But they start off against Auburn. Auburn was a team that gave them a fight, beat them actually straight up in Auburn, and then gave LSU a fight in the PMAC. And my goodness, did they take it to LSU? Took it to them,
yes.
And there was not any doubt about it. They obviously last year Poa suffered a head injury with a hard crash backward, head crashing to the floor. It had to be stretchered off, and what had to have been a very surreal and scary moment in Greenville in the arena. And then, of course, listen, South Carolina, we said this before when LSU played South Carolina in late January. We knew that South Carolina, talent for talent, maybe 1 through 7, LSU matches them and maybe even exceeds them, but South Carolina is a little bit deeper. And South Carolina, they tried to run away and hide. They tried to take control of that game and really kind of put it away. LSU did not let them. They kept on fighting. So anyway, we go through this. LSU has fought through some injuries, projected to be as high as a number 2 seed. Just tell me, first things first, let's, if you would, just sort of recap their trip through the SEC tournament and tell me what sort of some of your main takeaways are from
main
that
takeaway.
tournament.
I think the first game against Auburn, I was sort of surprised how they came out. They you could tell from the start they were just locked in and focused, and they were really hell bent on winning that game and proving that they were a better team than Auburn. And I've never seen them start out a game like that. They started 21-0 run or something like that.
Trying to shut them out in the first quarter.
Yeah. So they almost shut them out in the first quarter. So that was sort of the moment where I'm like, okay, they really have a shot at going getting to Sunday and maybe winning the whole thing. So that was sort of when I realized that. And then I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how they fought through everything that they were dealing with. Mikaylah Williams didn't play the first 2 games because she was dealing with a nagging foot injury. And Kim Mulkey made clear that if they needed her to play, she could have played, but they were just being cautious, sort of resting her to sort of make sure that she doesn't make that injury worse before the NCAA tournament. So they didn't have her, so they were already shorthanded with her. And then Poa goes down. Very scary moment on Saturday. So that you can imagine, like that scene, that whole, her just seeing her getting stretchered off the floor had to be, really draining for them, and it had to be really tough for them to deal with.
And they didn't fade.
And they didn't. No, they won. They beat Ole Miss. They sort of held off Ole Miss at the end there, and then they went to South Carolina and they really fought and battled hard, and they went down by double digits, 2 or 3 times as late as the third quarter, and each time they came back and they cut into that lead, and they almost really took the lead at one point in the third quarter. And so it was just more like, how much they fought through, and how much they had to battle just to get to Sunday. Angel Reese turned her ankle against Auburn, and After that game, she was walking through the hallway. She had a really bad limp, and she had a big ice pack on her ankle. And then for the next 2 games, she was walking into the arena. She had a big boot on her foot. So she was in a lot of pain. She was dealing with a lot of swelling and a lot of pain in her ankle. But she fought through. She played well. So it's just like they battled through a lot, and I think they showed that they really proved their mettle that they're locked in, they're focused, and they're one of the best teams in the country. And they've played South Carolina really well the 2 times they've played them.
Again, one of the things that was overshadowed because of the fracas, the thriller in Greenville that erupted at the end of the game was Flau'jae Johnson, just how well she played in those 3 games. 59 points. I'm going by memory here. I know she finished with 59 points in those 3 games. I think it was 25, 21, and 13. Yes. 25 against Auburn, 21 against Ole Miss, 13 against South Carolina. She shot 51.2% from the floor and 100% from the foul line.
Yep.
That is the definition of coming up big when you need one of your proven veteran players to come up big because you are a little thin. Just tell us. She looks pretty good right now, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does, and she's playing really well, and she's playing their best basketball of the season right now. I think she was their best player. You could argue she was the best player in Greenville for them. She was the best player, definitely without a doubt, in the Auburn game. It was really her, her shot making, her driving, her ability to finish around the rim that really ignited their offense at the start. So she's been playing really well. And Kim Mulkey has sort of discussed numerous times throughout the season how much she's improved, particularly with the way she attacks defenses off the dribble and the way she can sort of manipulate defenses to get to the rim and get to the free throw line. And that shows in her efficiency numbers. And I talked to Haley Van Lith after the Auburn game in the locker room, and I sort of asked her, like, I know you didn't play with Flau'jae last year, but so what's different about her game? How has she improved year over year? And Haley made a good point. I think she said, because she's shooting a lot better from the outside, her efficiency is up. Defenses are, they're respecting her shot more. They're closing out on her shooting more, and so that opens up more of her game. Like, she can attack off the dribble, she can attack closeouts, and then she can get to the rim, where she happens to be one of the best finishers in the country around the rim. She's really good at sort of moving around defenders and finishing layups in traffic. So she's been great. It's a great sign for LSU that she is looking comfortable and confident, that she's shooting well from the outside. And just the confidence that she's playing with, it's going to be, if she can carry that over into the NCAA tournament, that's going to be a huge boost.
I think some people forget how good of an athlete she is in some ways, because especially if you can get the outside shot going, that just opens up the floor more for not just her teammates, but for herself in driving lanes. And I mean, when you have an outside shot with that sort of quickness, it just makes containing you, especially off the dribble, that much more difficult. You mentioned the injuries earlier. Like, how much does this week in between, like, help them, I guess, get healthy by the time of the first round?
I think for a few of their injuries, the 3 injuries they're dealing with, the only thing that can heal them is time. You need ankle. For Angel, you need her ankle just time to heal and time for that swelling to go down. For Mikaylah, you need time for her to rest her foot. It's plantar fasciitis. That can be a very painful injury. You just need time for that inflammation to go down. I think, and with Poa, it's obviously, basketball is not the most important thing when you have a serious injury like that. And we haven't had a chance to ask Kim Mulkey directly if she thinks Poa could be available for the tournament. But in Greenville, after the South Carolina game, she sort of hinted that they could get her back at some point in the tournament. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see it. I'm no means by saying that, they're absolutely going to have her back, but we'll have to see if she can come back. It's sort of concussion protocol. It's different for anyone who goes in. It depends on the situation and how you respond to it. So it's a fluid situation with her, but they're going to have a week and a half off, after the SEC tournament before the NCAA tournament begins. So that's going to be a huge help for them to get some extra rest and to get some time to heal.
Presumably, now we understand that in Kim Mulkey's first year, LSU wound up in the first round they found themselves in a fight against Jackson State. That was not an easy game. Presumably, whatever first round draw they get, it would be easier to get through that game now with this team than it would have been with Kim Mulkey's first team. I say all that just to say, if Poa gets cleared, it's at least, and we're just wildly speculating now.
Yeah.
If Poa gets cleared even before that game, it's at least plausible that, well, maybe hold her out one more. You think you can get past a 15 seed or a 14 seed, and then you see what kind of draw you've got for the second round. and you sort of go from there. But certainly, if she's missed for this first weekend, that's a big blow. But certainly, this is why you play for a high seed, to get yourself a better draw. Speaking of which, we talk about depth on this team. Frankly, they're really only one person shorter than last year's team, which won the national championship. Of course, LSU basically throughout the postseason basically played with an 8-person roster. 3 coming off the bench, and that would be, now I'm going to get it wrong, it was Jasmine Carson and Samaya Smith, and who am I forgetting?
Poa.
That's
Poa.
right. Yeah, Poa. And so you have an 8-person rotation. Now they've really played with 7 for most of the past month or so. And so these injuries, these potential injuries, hurt. The other thing that it's worth bringing up now, because it was news this weekend, Kateri Poole, who has not played basically since November, former point guard who was on last year's team and played a key role. She played 35 games last season, about 4.2 points, something like that per game, but a huge presence on the defensive end, and took over as a starter for the postseason, for most of the postseason. She's in the transfer portal. Again, she hasn't played since November. She's in the transfer portal now, but it does sort of bring into focus. You lost her early on this season. You lost Samaya Smith, whose presence would have just been enormous coming down the stretch here.
Yes.
Another great option in the front court, and she looked like she was coming on in her sophomore year, really sort of turning the corner. It does sort of bring into focus, just sort of how thin this team is, and one injury can make all the difference in the world, or one missing player can make all the difference in the world. Obviously, LSU started Janae Kent in the championship game on Sunday, freshman guard. I don't know how much the coaching staff really trusts her, but just sort of take us through Kateri, what's going on with her, and just where LSU is in terms of depth, and sort of being able to sort of make it through and exceed.
Well, she's going into the portal according to some reports out there. She will enter when it officially opens on Monday after Selection Sunday, and so she's got another year of eligibility. She's in the same boat as Angel Reese and Haley Van Lith, where they have that COVID year, that extra 5th year of eligibility. So she's going to try to find a place to play for her 5th year. Again, LSU hasn't had her since early December, and so I think she's the type of player who LSU could really benefit from if they had her, just to have an extra body who can come off the bench and give them a few minutes, take some pressure off Mikaylah Williams and Flau'jae and Haley Van Lith, and sort of help out defensively, help out passing, sort of be the connector on offense, and the real a switchable sort of defender who can move her feet well and sort of defend the perimeter. So I think if they had a player like her, that'd be a huge boost for them, but they don't. So they have to rely more on some inexperienced players, and they have to rely more on their starting group. And so they have to they're asking a lot out of Mikaylah Williams and Flau'jae and Haley Van Lith and Poa. And last year, like you mentioned, they really went 8 deep throughout the regular season and the postseason. Now they can only really go 7 deep based on how Kim Mulkey's played it so far and how she's aligned her rotations. So like you said, they made it through Greenville. They got really banged up. They didn't come out of it unscathed, but it sort of seems like they avoided any sort of major injury where this player is not going to be available for the NCAA tournament. And so I think that's what they were hoping for, and I think they made it through with it without that.
My personal read, and tell me if I'm wrong, or tell me if you think I'm wrong, based on your opinion, my personal read on their approach to the SEC tournament was that they were probably going to hold Mikaylah out. But then the injury to last year in the second game almost kind of forced Kim Mulkey's hand to where Mikaylah had to play.
And they eased her in, Mikaylah.
Yes.
She didn't play 30-plus minutes like she would have if she were fully healthy. She played only about 23, I think. So they really tried to ease her in. They really tried to take it slow. I think if Poa hadn't gone down on Saturday, we probably don't see Mikaylah on Sunday, because what Kim Mulkey said in the build-up to the weekend is that Michaela's available, she's ready if we need her, and if in a perfect world she'd sit, but what happened in Greenville was not a perfect world. They lost last year, Poa, on Saturday, so they had to play her, and it sort of seems like she didn't really aggravate anything from what we can tell, so that's really all they were hoping for.
So she will have played. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Koki. You're going to say something.
No, go ahead, because that my next question might follow up on yours.
Well, so they will have played. So Mikaylah will have played that one game over the past week. She'll have almost another week to heal. That's obviously a good sign. We discussed the injuries. Time is the one thing that can heal, potentially heal these 3 injuries faster than anything else. Let's just say that one of these players has to either be limited or can't play in this first game or first couple of games. How much do you think we'll see out of Janae Kent?
I think you'll see
8 minutes, 10 minutes?
Maybe 10 to 15.
Mm-hmm.
You know, LSU, they started her on Sunday.
Right.
You know, that's one thing that also got overlooked. She didn't play starters minutes. She didn't play as much as Mikaylah Williams, but LSU started her, and I think Kim Mulkey wanted to see, throw her out there and see what she can give them. And it was overall a mixed bag. She committed a couple turnovers early, and Kim Mulkey gave her the quick pull early on, but she hit a 3. She made a couple nice plays on offense. She played good defense. She was solid in her rotation. She didn't make any glaring mistakes. So she was solid. I think we'll see. We'll find out in those first 2 rounds how much that performance showed Kim Mulkey that, hey, can I trust her? Can I really give her meaningful minutes? Because if she can give them, in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, if she can give them 10 to 15 minutes of solid play per game, then that'd be huge. And she can step into that, I guess, that Jasmine Carson role who she
it's a good
played
way.
last year.
Jasmine Carson, boy, talk about coming up big down the stretch. 6 threes in the championship game, if I'm not mistaken, last year. So I mean, look, hey, Selection Sunday is almost upon us. And so we're getting down to the nitty gritty. This is when it starts to get really fun. LSU has a number 8 net ranking right now. ESPN's latest projection as of Wednesday night was that LSU would be a number 2 seed. Let's just sort of sit and talk about it. I personally think if I were the NCAA selection committee, I would do everything I could to have South Carolina, Iowa, maybe UConn. Who else am I forgetting? Those 3 in LSU and maybe USC to spread them out.
USC is probably that would, if I had a dream Final Four.
Yeah, with
it'd
Juju.
be LSU, Iowa, South Carolina, and I guess USC, so we can really see Juju Watkins in the big
No
stage.
UConn, wow.
And that's a lot of star power. Well, UConn, disrespect and discount Gino at your own peril. But
they got star power too. That's
They
like
do.
That's why
They
I
do
mentioned
have a lot of
them,
star
That's
power,
right.
but Juju Watkins she's the
would
future.
agree. USC has to be in that 4.
She is the future. Yeah.
If I were a member of the NCAA selection committee, I would do everything to see if I couldn't set it up in such a way that gives me the highest possibility of seeing those teams in the Final Four. But we don't know. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. What are you expecting to see on Sunday, Reed?
Well, they're either going to be a 2 or a 3 seed. In the last sort of NCAA's reveal of the top 16 seeds, they were 9th overall out of 16 teams. And so they were right on that borderline between a 2 and a 3. And so we'll have to see how much the SEC tournament, winning 2 games and losing 1 to South Carolina, did that move them up? Did that move them back? Did that sort of keep them, right where they are in the eyes of the selection committee? I could see it either way, but what's important to them is that, they're going to be that 2-3 seed. That's where they were positioned the first 2 years of Kim Mulkey's tenure at LSU. So I think Kim Mulkey is right where she wants to be in the seeding. It's on the women's side at least, nobody. No team has won the championship after being, beneath a 4 seed. So they're comfortably in those 4 seeds. They're going to host the first 2 rounds. It's just a matter of if they're going to be a 2 or a 3 seed and where they're going to be placed in a regional as far as Albany or Portland.
Who are some of those teams that you think they're sort of vying against for whether the teams that are going to help determine the difference between them being a 2 or a 3?
That's a tough question. I think NC State, Kansas State are kind of in that mix. It's,
Miami right there, maybe?
No, it's more like, UConn's kind of around that territory. It's sort of like, I think what you have to go on LSU is their games against South Carolina. You know, and I think that's probably the biggest boost to their resume, even though they lost 2 of those
It's the
games.
toughest fights that South Carolina got.
Fights, yeah. Tennessee.
2 of their 3 toughest fights.
Yeah,
the
Well,
Tennessee
okay,
game.
Tennessee. Yes.
Tennessee, it took them a miracle for them to beat Tennessee, but Tennessee played them twice before, and it
Right.
wasn't particularly close. LSU played them as well as anybody played. So I think that's, in the eyes of the selection committee, in the eyes of Kim Mulkey, she's like, we passed the eye test. We can go toe-to-toe with the undefeated, head and shoulders best team in the country. And so maybe, you know, that Sunday game really gets the selection committee to move them up a little bit in the rankings. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But that's going to, if anything boosts their resume, that's what it's going to be.
Charlie Cream certainly, he was pretty adamant. The ESPN women's bracketologist was pretty adamant that he feels like that LSU is a solid number 2, but we don't know for sure. One thing I did want to mention before we get out, a couple of things before we get out of here. You know, it's been much discussed, obviously, the fracas and the aftermath of it. I'm going to speak only for myself here, and I'll make that clear. I think so many people felt as though maybe Dawn Staley at post-game handled it better than Kim Mulkey did. You know, the title of Kim Mulkey's autobiography is "Won't Back Down."
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's nothing that Kim
was-
Mulkey said would be necessarily surprising.
Yes.
But you know, I just feel in the deeper context of everything, whatever your opinions of Kim Mulkey are from coast to coast, I think it's interesting. What's interesting, if we want to zoom out a little bit, going into this season, LSU was the consensus number 1, and everybody wanted a piece of them. And now here we are. They're 4 losses or 5? I can't remember.
5.
Yeah. Okay.
5.
So,
Yeah.
All right. 5 losses, and they, you know, excuse the expression, took the fight to South Carolina twice and lost. And now we're almost all the way back around to where they were last year in terms of personality and in terms of narrative, in the sense that now they feel like maybe they're either the underdog or that everyone is against us, or now we're wearing the black hat and we have to take the fight to everybody else. And I'm not entirely sure that that's not a position that Kim Mulkey is uncomfortable with. I think she's probably comfortable, and frankly, I think they have got a lot of personalities. Flau'jae, certainly Angel, who sort of, Haley Van Lith for that matter, maybe sort of thrive on that. We're going to go take the fight to everybody else kind of narrative.
I think Kim Mulkey really is happy with where they're at right now. I think based on what she said, you know, after the South Carolina game, after they got back from Greenville, I really think that she thinks they're playing the best basketball of the season. And I think that she thinks they're well positioned to really make a run at the Final Four. And I think she's really, really happy with where they are. I don't think she can ask for much more.
It's just the health aspect of it.
Yeah.
That's the thing that if anything is going to hold this team back, it's going to be that, you know, before they get to, you know, the Final Four or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the health issue, the depth issue, and also, but I sort of agree with it. It certainly seems like they're locked in. You know, they are paying full attention and they are giving everything they've got because they see now it's crunch time, and also just sort of circumstances and the way everything's sort of played out, that it looks like that they're relishing the idea, the notion that they can take the fight to somebody and that they can give them everything they've got. Somehow the reigning national champions still feel like they have something to prove, and they're certainly playing like that. So,
and that's what Kim Mulkey wants. That's
that
the
is,
kind of
we
space,
are now playing in Kim Mulkey's playhouse.
That is the space that she wants her team to be in come March.
Yes. Yeah. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It's always going to be fun. Certainly all eyes are going to be on the LSU women as we go down the road. There are so many people coast to coast, no matter which side they're on, that would love to see a rematch between either South Carolina and LSU, or a rematch between Iowa and LSU, if not LSU and some other team in the Final Four. We will see if they can make it, starting with Selection Sunday. And of course, LSU baseball is gearing up for SEC play as well. Plenty to check out. Plenty going on the LSU beat as always. Another boring week for the LSU beat writers here on our staff. Please support your local journalists. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe if you haven't subscribed to us already, whether that's in print or in digital, and stay up to date with all their work, with all the latest headlines with the LSU newsletter. Go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter to get everything delivered straight to your inbox. We are here every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider. on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please subscribe to that channel if you have not already. You can catch us live there. If you don't catch us live, you can always catch us after the fact at any time on that YouTube channel. And you can find us, if you don't find us there, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And we are brought to you, of course, every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about them, please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. It's spring. There's plenty going on, plenty to stay up to date with, and plenty to check out, and never a dull moment on the LSU beats. So we will be here to document it all. For Koki Riley, for Reed Darcey, for Amelia Cotton behind the glass, my name is Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.